history. My name's David Yevon, by the way, and I'm privileged to have known Bill for longer than 2 or 3 of you have lived. Notice that I say 2 or 3 of you. I met Bill in 1968 when I was trying to find someone who would join me in suing the mines for polluting in various places in Arizona, and I heard of this already famous attorney who had caused huge consternation at the University of Arizona for successfully overturning their traffic laws, and later on for making sure that female employees, janitorial employees, got paid the same as male janitorial employees for the same work. He was successful. And that's just the beginning of a list. I also have to tell you that Bill and I have traveled together. We've been in the deserts of Peru, Bolivia, and we've been on Lake Titicaca together. We have traveled in the lowlands of Veracruz in Mexico, and of course, as many of you, we've been in Quino Bay. Bill and Susie and I have been there a lot. And I never have ceased to admire his ongoing insight into the social injustice that pervades the United States and its relation to the economic basis injustice of our society, and the two are always tied together. And Bill has taught me more, I think, than any other individual I have ever known. Through all of our travels, all of our lawsuits. I worked for Bill for a year, by the way. He was my employer for a year, and he treated me rather well. I had several complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, but they went nowhere. But Bill is, as Susie once said, he is a gang of one. And every one of us here are indebted to Bill for some of the enormously important cases that have come. He alone would be willing to take on the unfairness of elections, the injustice concerning El Rio, the ongoing injustice everywhere in the state of Arizona. Only Bill had the insight and the social conscience to be able to combine, and the generosity. In addition to being one of the smartest people I've ever known, I think Bill is probably also the most generous. And any of you who have worked with Bill know that. Well, we're here tonight to celebrate one of Bill's great victory with a terrific group of people as well. And to give you a little background on that, Ceci Cruz wants to come up and say how this all came together and give us this history of what we're celebrating tonight.
Thank you very much for being here. I want to first start off by thanking the committee that put this function together. And that's Parnella Jones, Scott Egan, Jean Ramirez, Raul Ramirez, Salomon Valdenegro, Tabit Khalid, and Anthony Peralta. They deserve a big round. They did a great job. And on behalf of the El Rio Coalition too, I am the chair representing El Rio Coalition and also the plaintiff. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us in thanking Billy Joe Risner for his commitment to our community, for his vigilance for justice, and on giving of himself in righting the wrongs that have affected so many of us. I'd also like to say that Bill is, he's a person that all of you know. When you know him personally, you understand where Bill comes from. He comes from knowing the difference between right and the difference between wrong and right. Before I also start, I want to definitely thank Susie, his lovely wife, and his family members who are here. Thank you, Susie. And also Ken Graham, his partner, and the staff that are here with us today also. Thank you. Because all of you know that without Susie, a lot of the work that Bill done, he would have not been able to do. So we owe a big round of applause also for Susie. Thank you very much. And I'd like many of you, have attended functions where individuals are recognized as community leaders. The majority of the times when we have attended, these people are recognized for the position that they hold or for the job that they're getting paid to do. That's not Bill. Bill is not that kind of a person, and that's not why we're here tonight. We are honoring Bill for the work that he does for the community and not his title. The first time I met Bill was back in the 70s when my generation was idealistic and we were involved in civil rights. I have known about the cases that Bill has worked on from mutual acquaintances, from organizations that he's helped, and of course by reading the newspaper. Today, though, I know Bill's work personally. A year ago, when a group of ragtag, you might call, group of individuals who weren't afraid of using the word that they were activists, got together to save El Rio, where we're all here today, from the wrecking ball. Bill was there to join the El Rio Coalition. We didn't seek him, he sought us out. I would like to also first clear a couple of misinformation, misconceptions about the El Rio issue. Our first reason to form the coalition was to save a green space in our community that has a long history of why it is important to us. And you'll hear from Salomon Baldenegro later on about that history. And the second reason we wanted to form the coalition and to continue was to get to know the reason why, or the reasons why this piece of land, this valuable piece of land, was putting out to the lowest bidder. It wasn't even to the highest bidder, to the lowest bidder, to give them what our community paid for, what our community's tax dollars paid for, to give it away. The reason is transparency in government. Bill knows that well. He's fought for it for a long time. That was the second reason, and we still continue on that path. While some of you have heard that the case was won, and that Bill won, and that El Rio won, well, we did win. Right off the bat, we saved El Rio. But transparency in government, that still's not finished. A year into it, yeah, the judge said the city lied. It lacked integrity. But when it came to awarding attorney's fees, which that in the law states that when you prevail, you get attorney's fees. Bill was only awarded not even a fifth of the time and amount of work and resources that he's committed to this case. It's been going on for a year. So you can imagine. We quickly got together and just went full force. Knowing the way Bill works, it is always, as they say, balls to the wall. And we kept going. When our public records request was reviewed, Risner, who believes to his core that government should be transparent, was there. And we thank you, Bill. 1 year later even, Bill is still fighting for us. Winning the case, limiting attorney's fees, that hasn't played into the way Bill plays. He's still fighting. It has been my privilege to sit next to Bill in court. I know firsthand what a brilliant lawyer Bill is. I got to see his briefs. No, I got to read his briefs. I know why the judicial community respects him so much, because Bill has been involved in so many issues in the community. And why he's been successful is because he also knows the dynamics of the community, the politics of the community, the heart of the community, and that's powerful. So I also remember now, after so many years, why we called him Wild Bill Risner. He is a fighter for what is right and what is the right thing to do. And for that, Bill, there's not enough thank yous, there's not enough money that we could ever give you that would pay you for that work. So thank you from the heart. And now we have Sal Baldenegro, I think, who's going to speak about the first El Rio Coalition.
Well, before Salomon comes up, I do have to tell you that I know these short people just wreck microphones everywhere. Thank you. I didn't meet Solomon, I think, probably until 1971. He doesn't know it, but I actually met him, I believe, in 1971 when he was still a student at the University of Arizona, undergrad. You don't remember that, Saul, but I do, because there wasn't anybody like him. And Saul has been through the battles and has seen the history as it developed, and no one can, I think, elucidate better the background of El Rio and its importance to all of us than Solomon Montenegro.
One last thing, and I don't want to, I just want to thank three people also, and I'm not thanking them because they're legislators or they're elected officials. I'm thanking them because they met with us, they fought with us, they lent their name to the El Rio Coalition. They are members of the El Rio Coalition. They attended meetings, they went to the hearings with the mayor and council and those people are Bruce Wheeler, Sally Gonzalez,
You know, this is a very moving experience for me, very symbolic, for the reasons that I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But Bill Risner, unlike many people, is not a Johnny-come-lately. He's not somebody who just had an epiphany a couple of weeks ago. Bill's been around for many, many years. His path and I, we crossed paths at the university back in the 60s. And those of you who were around then know we were fighting many battles then. Civil rights was going on, the Chicano movement was going on, the UFW movement was going on, the anti-war movement was going on, women's movement was going on, the environmental movement was going on. And Bill was involved in all those things. But you know, we're here to see what a great guy Bill is. But in reality, Bill is a real pain in the ass. He really is. He's a pain in the ass. The good thing is that he's a pain in the ass to the right people. You know, Bill, when we were doing all the things at the university in the 60s, the president was a guy named Richard Harville. And some of you may remember him. Remember him? Remember him? And he was not very friendly to us. He was always messing with us, trying to get us arrested, trying to disperse our rallies and our pickets. Well, the time came when Richard Harville retired, and they had a big party for him. And there was food, and at the end, there was going to be a cake. And the cake all of a sudden was missing. The cake was missing. And the Barney 5 squad at the university, that was before they had a police department. They had a bunch of followed the trail of crumbs, and they came to this house where all the lowlifes and the mayhem gang hung out. And there's Bill Risner with cake crumbs all over his shirt, frosting all over his mouth, and that's where the cake went. So no issue is too trivial or too petty for Bill to fight. But you know, this is very symbolic that we're here. I was arrested right there where the bar is. This is where I was arrested, 1970, in August 1970. And because we were not allowed to be here. The members of the public were not allowed to come into this clubhouse. In those days, it was called a coffee shop. It doesn't exist anymore. They tore it down and replaced it with this one. But we were arrested, and this is a public course, mind you, the city owned it. And they arrested us right where the gentleman is by the bar. And guess who was one of the lawyers who bailed us out? Mr. Bill Risner. Mr. Bill Risner. He was all of 26 years old then. He was maybe 2 years out of law school, maybe 3 years out of law school. Of course, he was a whole different looking Bill Risner then. His hair was still dark, and he was a relatively good looking fellow then. That was many moons ago, Bill. But Bill, at 26, mind you, out of law school, first out of law school, was already working on our behalf. Matter of fact, at that coalition, the oldest living member that I know of that coalition is Velia Morelos. Where is she? You're around here somewhere.
Yeah, she's back there.
She just celebrated her 93rd birthday. 93rd birthday. And that's who Bill Risner is. Thank you. Now, transparency in government seems like a very lofty phrase. But what that means is that people, the government whom we pay, whose taxes our taxes support, should not act in secret, should not go behind people's backs and do evil things. That's what that means. It's a very simple concept, but... And Bill, back in 1970, in September of 1970, the city of Tucson got the county attorney to form this bizarre thing called a one-man grand jury. Have you guys ever heard of that? A one-man grand jury. And they picked a very conservative right-wing judge to be the grand jury. So they called me and 7 other people, and we knew from the get they were going to indict us from the very get. But we also knew that a one-man grand jury is not the norm, is not right. So we had our attorneys go fight, and we won. We killed that concept in its tracks before they called any of us. And again, Mr. Risner's name is on those briefs. Mr. Risner was right there doing that. And then they came at us in another direction. They tried to indict us for felonies by having preliminary hearings on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. Now, who the hell has ever heard of a PH hearing at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays? Now, the reason they did that is because they knew that we were going to be out here picketing on Saturday. So they figured that he got us in court on Saturday morning, our supporters would go over there to support us in court, and we would not be picketing out here. And again, we killed that in the bud, we nipped that in the bud. And when you go read those briefs, you're going to see the name of Bill Risner on those briefs. It says 1970. So now we fast forward to 2014, and we're back here at Del Rio, and whose name is on the briefs that Ceci read? Bill Risner. And that's the man we're celebrating. But this man is not somebody who had an epiphany, who put his finger up to the wind to see how the wind is blowing. He stands for what's right, when it's right, and because it's right. And that's powerful. There's not too many people in this community who do that. And for that, I think we owe Bill Risner one hell of a debt. And both of those things that I just mentioned really have to do with transparency in government, with government acting in secret to do evil things to its citizens. That's just not right. That is not right. And I think that those of us who are here, and many of us who could not be here, should be grateful that we have the likes of Bill Risner in our midst, working on our behalf. And whenever we see him on the street, we should wave at him, smile at him, and thank him again, over and over again. He deserves it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bill pointed out to me the last couple of days that there's an irony about this meeting tonight, is that we are able to meet here because of a terrible decision that the city of Tucson made to privatize El Rio. Because if the city of Tucson still owned and operated this place, or operated it, there is no way that they would allow a group of rabble-rousers like us to be president of this place. But because it's private, they don't care as long as the money is there, and they don't really care at all. So, thanks to a wrong decision, here we are. You know, the privatization is one of these shibboleths, one of these nonsensical phrases that you hear praised. If I can leave you with one fact tonight, I'm going to throw it out. It has nothing to do with El Rio. Privatization. Let's just talk about it for 20 seconds.
No longer.
In terms of the efficiency of administration, the most efficient provider of medical services in the United States is Medicare, an average administrative overhead of 3%. The average of the private insurance companies which control our lives is between 10 and 20%. There we have the efficiency of privatization. Thank you, City of Tucson, for privatizing, but just for tonight. The law on privatization is it reaches all of us, but Bill has always been heavily involved in knowing what the up-to-date status of various laws are. I know that because I worked with him and watched him. But Bill has an interesting reputation among the legal profession. There are a number of lawyers who shudder at his very name even now. But even those who shudder when they hear his name have a sort of lingering respect for him. And there's somebody here who can talk about that. And he himself is quite a lawyer. Thabit Khalidi knows Bill and knows what's going on with Bill and the legal community.
Well, my words are probably going to fail me because my words are already failing me. When I was a young lawyer, I came to Tucson and very quickly met Bill and realized that Bill was one of those independent thinking lawyers such that if you called the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws with a problem, they'd refer you to Bill. And if you called the National Rifle Association, they'd also refer you to Bill. And while David Yetman talks about when he sued the mines for environmental damage, when I married my wife, who works for the Nature Conservancy at the time, I also found out that Bill had sued the Nature Conservancy. So, speaking of shibboleths, there are none in Bill's life and in his worldview. Bill has defended our republic and its citizens throughout his career. And he's done it at great personal cost, because I can tell you, I've known Bill now for over 30 years, and not once has a judge given him the fees that he's earned on these cases. And he still takes case after case because he's defending our republic. And for that, I thank him for being an inspiration to me, and I thank him for being the type of guy, and Corky, I'm stealing this from you, being the type of guy that you can be in a car with Bill for 5 hours, you're 20 minutes from your destination, and he'll say, you know, there's a nice road down here that I've always wanted to take. And you learn a whole new world. So thank you, Bill, for everything you've done for this republic, for us, and for being an inspiration to me.
Bill also has been a businessman. I found out about it when I first met him back in the 1960s, and he was quite proud. He had a real estate company. He showed me the credit card that he had of his real estate company, His company was called Fly By Night Realty. It's true. He will not deny it. And I don't want to go anywhere with that, but I will leave you with that. As most of you know, Bill was incensed by what he considered to be a fraudulent election several years ago, which created the Regional Transportation Authority, and was convinced that there was more than just hanky-panky going on. There was out-and-out fraud involving the county. No one else in their right mind would ever have taken on that issue, but Bill did. And to talk to us about that is Paul Hills. Paul, are you here? Yeah.
Hi. Yes, I first actually met Bill Risner at a meeting of the Pima County Democratic Party where they were introducing their new lawyer to lead us through this RTA suit. We were suing the county because their election division used this machine that could be broken into and change all the votes in an election in under 2 minutes. And it wasn't so much that people wanted to change the outcome of the RTA, the vote was the vote. What we wanted to do was have someone with some standing look at the method of casting and counting votes in the county. Well, it was going to be a long trip, but Bill prepared all the times we went to court. What was it, a year and a half, 2 years that we did the first round? And it was about $1.25 million that the county lost because, of course, they were right through. The interesting thing is, when I first went to Bill's office, I learned a couple of things. First, this was an attorney who didn't just work for rich folks and corporations. They're all the ordinary people in their pictures and things in his office. This is a real person. I was amazed. I've worked with a lot of attorneys in my time, and there he was. The second was how much patience he had. We kept going back to court, we kept winning every round, and nothing would happen, and nothing would happen, and nothing would happen. And finally, even the Pima County Democratic Party stopped paying for these things, except that poor Bill was the one who was getting shorted on all this. The thing is, another irony of this week here, it was just last week that the Arizona Supreme Court finally quashed the last of all of the appeals on that RTA case. So it's, what, 9 years, I guess, finally. But the other thing about the patience was that Bill also had the patience not just to deal with the city and the county and the Pima County Democratic Party. He also had the patience to deal with activists who had more energy than brains. As we would go through these round after round after round, I'm getting tired of this, right? The law should be on our side if we keep winning all these rounds and get something out of it. And he says, there's got to be a U.S. attorney. We had tried the county attorney. That was no good. That's the person we're suing. We had tried the attorney general of the state. He found nothing wrong. Okay, there's got to be a U.S. attorney, I said. He says, yeah. The guy who's acting as the attorney for the county is the U.S. attorney that would handle this case. So he explained in very simple, generous terms to me, this was not a good idea. But it is the notion that he keeps fighting these fights. As I say, it doesn't matter who votes for whom if they're always countered by someone who already knows what he wants the outcome to be and will work to make it so. And it's that kind of fight that Bill keeps taking up, despite the fact that he gets paid, as they said before, about 1/5 of what he actually earns in these decisions. But he acts as a constant reminder to us. That Don Quixote fellow, we all need that. Because if you don't keep fighting that fight, as it says there, Clarence Darrow, if you don't keep fighting that fight, the bad guys will always win and it will be forever. So Thank you, Bill, for everything.
Another thing all of us really know about Bill that I want to underscore is his passionate commitment to racial justice. And it's not just something that comes from observing what's going on around him. Bill studies history. He is a real expert on the racial history of the Southwest, of Mexico. Bill is an authority on the Maya Indian civilization of the Yucatan. You want to ask about it, he will tell you. He studies in order to understand what we are seeing and what the history is. So he is a social justice scholar in his thinking and in the way he lives. And I have learned from watching Bill what that means, because the racist elements in our society are ever growing. And it is the kind of ability that Bill has to cut through all the nonsense and see what's really going on that we need and we continue to need. So what you have heard other people, the other speakers talking about Bill, is just beginning to scratch the surface. Bill Risner has affected every one of us in ways that only we will begin to understand when we really think about them. And I want to thank him for being my friend, for being a difference in Tucson, for being a difference in Arizona, and a difference in the United States. If there are others of you who would like to come up and say a few words about Bill, this is your chance. I would love to hear some of you come up and give us your little testimony. Let's call it testimony. Oh, Scott would like to say something.
Very briefly. You know, Bill's been a very close friend of mine for many years, very close friend. And he's been, you know, not only a friend, but an advisor, been my lawyer, unpaid lawyer, but he's been my lawyer. And as he is for everybody. But I have a lot of stories about Bill, but I'm not going to go into it. I just want to thank him for one thing. In the early 90s, there was a trial going on in Tucson. It was called the Tucson 6 trial, and six Irishmen, Irish Americans, were put on trial for supporting the Irish Republican Army. And that was one of the trials, as opposed to Sanctuary and many other trials that Bill was involved in. That was one that he wasn't involved in officially. However, as I guess, I don't know if I was called an unindicted co-conspirator or something, but he was my advisor during that time. And at one point I said to Bill, look, I don't know all of these guys here, but here's what I've done. And I laid out to Bill all of the things that I had done for the Irish Republican movement. And I said, what's your advice? And he said, get the hell out of the country. It's a true story. And he says, and don't come back until the trial is over. And so Pernilla and I took our old we had a little Volkswagen camper van, and we drove down the coast of Mexico, and we didn't come back until after the Tucson 6 were all acquitted. We came back a week later. And I just wanted to say, Bill, that was such a great trip we took. Thank you very much, because it was really one of the best road trips we've had.
Thank you.
I am reminded that there is a Republican here. And I know he wants to say something. Abel Franzen.
Might be two. You better check with Edith to see what he else is saying. Just to make sure I don't want to stop, I actually took some in-depth notes. Seriously, the funny thing about this is there's more people in this room who are friends of mine than I had the last time I went to a meeting of the Pima County Republican Club, just whatever that's worth. And I was up at Oro Valley for a candidates forum about 2 weeks ago, all candidates, so there must have been 12, 15 candidates, usual handlers, camp followers, all the people that come along. You've been to those things before. And there were less people in that room than there are in this one. Seriously. So Billy, maybe you think about running for something again, huh? Order. You have a base here, Bill. I first got to know Bill in 1974. That's about 40 years ago, Bill, when we were both on the same side of a actually rather fundamental issue, and it was called, we wanted to keep electing our judges, and the establishment didn't. And actually that strikes to the really fundamental principle, I think, that goes beyond parties and philosophies today, but the basic law is who shall govern. And we always thought if you're going to have people with power, maybe we ought to get to pick them. Remember that one, Bill? Unfortunately, we lost that one, so some committee meets in a back room somewhere and decides who your judges are going to be. And as Boss Tweed once said, just let me do the nominating, and I don't much care who does the voting. Anyway.
We won in Pima County.
Yeah, we won in Pima County. We won in about 5 other counties too. But what took us, of course, was for some reason Maricopa. Oh well. I finally decided what we should have just called the group we put together, which had all kinds of strange folks from all sorts of strange places. It would be the caucus of people who know the game ain't on the level. Honestly, just getting serious for just a minute. There stands a guy, says him at the moment, but there figuratively stands a guy, who had he wished to be a trial lawyer and just see how much money he could make at doing it, he'd be doing real well, don't we all know that one? And no one has given to principle of more of himself than Billy Joe Risner. And it's honor, Bill, to call you a friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Emil. Emil used to work for me too. He might not want to acknowledge that.
Keep that one quiet.
John Murphy was involved in the ongoing attempt and successful attempt in which Bill was heavily involved at keeping KXCI democratic in the sense of democracy. John here? There's John. Come on.
I don't know, what was it, 10, 12 years ago, something like that. KXCI is a community radio station, as everybody here knows, and to whatever extent it is a community radio station today, Bill's got a small hand in. A little while back, they stopped acting like a community radio station and started acting more like a frat house. And it gets back to the issue of transparency. And talking about long fights, that lasted a year and a half, 2 years, and we finally won what we got. And but it wasn't after a lot of nasty, unethical attacks on Bill and on several other members of the KXCI Democracy Initiative before we finally prevailed. And again, it was Bill's intelligence, it was Bill's doggedness, it was Bill's generous nature that helped us win that one. So, thanks, Bill.
Margaret McKenna from Barrio Hollywood.
Yeah.
I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the people in Barrio Hollywood, because you gave us a voice with working with us with the coalition too, because there's no transparency when it comes to Barrio Hollywood. And you just helped us move forward with that, and we really, all the people in my neighborhood appreciate it. I'm no longer the president, but I'm the vice president. I can say whatever I want to, okay? So there's never been any transparency while I've led my neighborhood. from Ward 1, except when Bruce was there. Where are you, Bruce? Yeah? And thank you for helping us, because you really helped us, and you've helped us progress with our fight in our barrio. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
One confession that I have to submit to you is that Bill dragged me into a lot of dirty politics. I was living an austere, isolated life in the Chiricahua Mountains, managing a summer camp in 1976. And Bill came up and said, "Dave, you should come back to Tucson and run for supervisor, you'd win." And that was the farthest thing from my mind. But he's a persuasive young man. And against all odds, I came back, and I don't know what happened, whatever it was. Anyway, Bill, your responsibility for whatever it was. Would anybody else like to come up? Margo Gutierrez. Just because she's my comadre, don't think we have any special affection for each other.
In 1970, I left home, which was liberating, and I hung out with a bunch of nefarious folks, like Salomon Valdenegro and Drew Paulette and Paz Descanse, Dave Cantrell. And we used to hang out at a joint on North 4th Avenue, John Brown Party. And somebody came to town. I can't remember if it was Spiro Agnew or James Watt. And we demonstrated. And for some reason, the cops got really mad at us. We were at that locale on North 4th Avenue, which later became the food conspiracy. And we heard through bullhorns that we needed to come out with our hands up. And we didn't want to do that. We thought for sure we'd be arrested. Bill was there with us, and he went out with his hands up. We closed the door, and we heard a body slam on the window. Remember that, Billy Joe? And he negotiated our safe exit. So thanks for getting body slammed for us.
It takes a lot of hits.
And Milton still says, Billy Joe, that you're our lawyer. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. I wasn't aware of Bill's body slam history, but now I am. We can incorporate that into a number of news stories. Anyone else would like to come up? Please.
Good evening. My name is Blake Gentry, and probably most of you are my elders. And I say that in total respect, especially for having known Bill through Katja Peterson and Geir Landau at their house. There's maybe a little thing that isn't so clear about Bill, and that's where some of his family comes from. When I met Bill, I talked to him, and he told me that part of his family is from Kentucky, and part of my family was from a place that became called North Carolina. And in 1842, a woman named Cora Florence Welch and 16,000 other people and 4 other tribal nations were deported. Bill is a part of our tribe. We are the Cherokee Nation. And I know that Bill has had exemplary service in the law profession, but I also want to say that he has shown great solidarity with indigenous people, especially the O'odham in Mexico, but many other people. And if you don't know that about Bill, you may have maybe a different understanding of what the defense of the Republic means.
listening to all of this, I was trying to remember all the times that Bill has represented me in court. I can't even count how many times. It's way back, and oh my God, remember that we sued over the ownership of the student bookstore, and that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Bill Risner representing, thank you. And all the times I was going to jail. And this, I want to thank Bill for what he's given me going forward, as the yuppies say. Here, this is such a crime, such a crime. I was in the legislature for many years, and after the election, the ballots are locked in a box, and nobody can ever look at them. I remember there was a case, a friend of mine was running for city council, and she did okay, but in 2 precincts, she got 0 votes. We went down to the judge, and the city argued that she must have really been unpopular in those 2 precincts. And we almost, that's what it has to be to get into court. And we got into court, and we realized that the ballots weren't punched correctly, scored correctly, so they didn't punch. But even with that, we barely could get into court. So as a legislature, the ballots are locked away after the election, and you can't ever look at them until they get burned. And so I can ask for Chuck Huckleberry's notes. I can ask for a record of his phone calls. I can ask for his diary, everything, but I can't look at the ballots. So these guys with the RTA fighting for 10 years, all that money and effort put in so we couldn't look at the ballots. Now, that wouldn't happen unless, right? It wouldn't happen unless. And we can't do anything about that unless. So looking at this, one person, a director of elections, can write a little program on those memory cards that nobody can ever see. There's no provision of the law for anybody to ever look at those. And it can subtract 1 vote, every second vote from candidate A and give it to candidate B. And that will never, ever be detected. There's no way under our system to detect that. Now, fixing this is even more important than getting the money out of politics. Getting the money out of politics is the prime thing, but it doesn't matter if they can rig the election. So we have to do something about that. So we're all going to have to work on our legislators and make sure there's no reason for it. In this day and age, with all the open meetings and open records, that you can't look at the ballots. So I hope that you will all work to do that. Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Don Ponco. I'm going to put a stop to this accolade. I think Bill's got to have enough for one night. We'll all be around, and I want you all, before Ceci comes here to close this, I want you all to look around at this room and look at the cross-section of Tucson that's here and realize what a remarkable accomplishment that this cross-section of our community would come together and honor the person who celebrates that particular cross-section. And now he wants to say something. I don't know whether we should let him or not.
We're going to let him speak after we recognize him. We're going to let him speak after we recognize him. We want you to talk. And what I'd like to do is because we are presenting to Bill the El Rio Coalition, and I want those members of the El Rio Coalition to come up here. Please, if you're a member of the El Rio Coalition, please come up here. Which one? The El Rio Coalition. Either one. Either one.
Macario.
I'll take a picture, something else. Reel it.
Big group. Susie, can you come up here? Yes. We want to first give our whole heartfelt thanks to you because we know the support that you give Bill, the strength that you keep his family together, and allow Bill to do the wonderful work that he does. And for that, you deserve our heartfelt thank yous. Now, Bill, would you like to come up here now? And Bill, we would just, this is just a little symbol, such a very small symbol of what represents what you mean to us. And it's right here. I'd like to read. El Rio belongs to the people. And Bill Risner, Esquire, attorney for the people. In gratitude for your tireless dedication in defending the many civic and social causes for those voices that would never obtain justice, few walk in your footsteps. We could not have done this without you. The El Rio Coalition 2, June 13th, 2014. Thank you, Bill. And Bill will now say a few words. Just a few. Just a few.
Maybe I'll keep it brief if you want.
As many as you want, Bill.
As long as you want.
First of all, thanks for being here. It's great being at a place where you got a lot of friends who say nice things about you. You know, people like Dave Yetman, who's made my life so much better in so many ways. As an incredible person who's an intellectual with a PhD who wrote his dissertation on Wittgenstein, but has taught me about plants and birds and everything in life. It's phenomenal. But, you know, I want to take advantage of the people here that are as involved in the city as they are, and I want to talk a little about the case that we have, the public records case, where we were trying to find out and are still trying to find out the internal workings of the city when they came up with the idea and this transaction that this historical park would be sold really for pennies to a for-profit company. And we don't have all the records at all. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. This project was known as Project Study. And so we've been to court a lot. 4 or 5 times the city says we've turned over everything. Last week, for the first time, they turned over and said, oh, here's some couple hundred new emails that we finally asked the IT department to look for emails under the name Project Study, which, I mean, that's 1 year and they'd never looked. The people who were in charge of the project had hard files that have never been turned over. The main guy in the project says, I gave him the next, couple of days after the request came in from Cecilia. I gave him to the lawyer, and he said, gosh, I've lost him. And they say that nobody else keeps files, and they don't make notes and stuff like that. You know, that is you know, the brazenness of all of that is just astonishing. But if we can set that aside, the interesting thing is the Grand Canyon University through TRIO and stuff, they came to Tucson, and the story was that we see in the records is they said, we want a large piece of land cheap and below market value. Pretty cool. I mean, I think others might like a large piece of land cheap, you know? And the city then got involved in what they call negotiations. But, you know, the fundamental thing of anybody in a negotiation, or the fundamental thing if you're selling or considering selling anything you have, is first to determine what's the value of what you're selling. What's the value of what you're giving up? And in these records, there's nothing about the city determining the value. The entire process by the city staff is they say, gee, there's a constitutional provision in Arizona called the gift clause, and we just can't give it to this private company. So how are we going to get around the gift clause? The city's got, you know, like 21 little things where they give you, you don't pay this tax, you don't pay this tax, you don't pay something else. They look at those things. They scotch, you know, the city, there's an ordinance, we have to do an appraisal to market value. We can't quite do that. So they get a guy, say, look, that beautiful golf, you know, what we're seeing outside that window, at least when the, you know, light was still out there. They call the appraiser guy and say, hey, look, we'd like you to do a little hypothetical appraisal. Pretend that this doesn't have trees and grass and mature vegetation. Don't look at the location and all these other aspects that make this a great site. Pretend it's just a piece of raw dirt with nothing on it. And, you know, and there's another piece of land somewhere that was like $3.5, $4 a foot. You know, maybe you could use that as a comparable. These guys come back with something that's like, you know, a fifth of what the price is. They figure out all the goodies that they could give them. You know, that's something they do. But nowhere in those records do they say, you know, what's the value of this as open space? They put in there, and the manager puts in his letter, he says, you know, the west side is short on parks and green space, so if we make a deal, you're going to have to work with us to get this, you know, by the public. They recognize all of that stuff, but there's nothing, not a penny, no recognition, no talking to parks, not talking about anything else. What's the value of this to Tucson? Nothing in there. And that's something that we all, it's a problem for all of us, because that's the rot that's in City Hall, because the way they do business is what can we give these people without consideration of what are we giving up? What's the benefit to the public? You know, it is mind-boggling. And, you know, all these records, the key stuff of who's behind this stuff, we don't know now. Maybe, you know, we'll never know. But we're learning a lot, and the reason that we're doing that fight is because this has been an interesting example for all of us, because, you know, we saw, I don't know if you, a couple months ago, you know, where the Attorney General says, well, we've concluded together with our FBI investigation that the city's mismanaged $250 million with Rio Nuevo. And because of a U.S. Supreme Court case, we can't prosecute anybody for a felony and put them in jail. And the city said, well, that's the end of that. Let's look forward. You know, it's like what you see in Washington. Let's move forward. And this is part of that moving forward. And the moving forward and the New Deal, they don't look at the value. So what this coalition has been doing and fighting for is a really important example for the city that's important for the public. And of course, we all live in Tucson where we don't have a media, we don't have a newspaper or anything, and you've not seen a word about this in any newspaper, and you won't, because it's up to us to make, you know, these guys do what they're supposed to do, and Lord help us. And I'm thrilled to be here with so many and hug so many great people that have been in so many fights, because you're talking about fights we were in years ago, and if we had time, there's a lot of stories. It'd be a lot of fun, but I've been, you know, trying to just, like, I'm on my second beer, it's cool, I'm trying to go with this. So, thanks a lot. You know, personally, I'd like to hug you all again, so thanks.
Thank you all for being here. Buy Bill another beer, give him some more hugs, and that concludes our program. But I just want to thank OB Sports for providing this facility and helping with the arrangements that they did, and want to thank him. Thank you.